Well, the U.S. is taking more steps to normalize relations with Cuba. Officials will meet in Havana next week to discuss a regular airline service between the two countries. Right now, American carriers are not allowed to fly regular routes there. Word of the meeting comes on the heels of a report about a looming vote in the UN. The U.S. may abstain in a vote on a resolution condemning our long-standing embargo on Cuba. Rick Grenell is a former advisor to 4 U.S. ambassadors to the UN and a Fox News contributor. So, Rick, for your years at the UN, this is a vote that has happened more than 20 times, 23 times. What exactly is it, and why does everyone vote against us?
Well, as you and most viewers know, this is not a vote in the Security Council where the U.S. has a veto, 15 countries there. This is a vote in the General Assembly where no one has a veto, and there's 193 countries. So the majority vote will win. Every single year, the United States loses this condemnation vote from the UN General Assembly condemning our law, it's a U.S. law, on an embargo for trade with Cuba. So in order to change that law, it has to be an act of Congress. What we have here is the President of the United States, and this is unprecedented. I have never heard of the President of the United States going around Congress to allow the UN to condemn a U.S. law. So what, in effect, this is, Susan Rice's idea, is what my sources say, is to lobby the U.S. Congress via the UN. It's really an outrageous vote that would take place, and the United States, our ambassador, Samantha Power, should stand up against it, even though the U.S. administration wants to see all of these laws changed. The law is the law, and the United States president has to follow the law.
Right, has to follow the law.
He can't lobby to change the law.
As you rightly point out, is that the embargo has to be lifted by Congress, by our representatives that are also in government. Just so our viewers know, here's an example of the vote in 2012. 188 countries voted against us. 3 voted in favor of us: the United States, Israel, and the island of Palau. You had 2 absentia votes, the Marshall Islands.
Thank God for Palau.
Right, Palau's coming through for us.
Marshall Islands and Palau always help us.
Right, Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia. Those were the votes in absentia. So we would be in the absentia category. The question is, Rick, even if we do this symbolically, and when I say we, the administration decides to do this symbolically, does it have any impact? Does it mean something?
It does mean something, and we shouldn't forget the country of Vanuatu, who usually votes with us on these types of votes.
Thank you.
But look, it means a lot because it's a symbolism in the United Nations General Assembly is the only thing that they have. These laws don't make, these votes don't make laws. It's the General Assembly of the United Nations. It's a big bully pulpit. So therefore, when we lose a big vote or we try to lobby Congress to change, it's very messy. This is what dictators do. Dictators, and the UN is very accustomed to dictators. Dictators tend to ignore the laws that they want to in their own country, or they just change them willy-nilly because the one person in the head of state role wants to change them. The United Nations understands these types of games that dictators play. They are going to view this as President Obama acting like a dictator and ignoring the laws that he doesn't like in his own country.
Well, we'll see what happens when that vote actually takes place. We know there has been some talk, as we talked about the Iran deal in the past. Critics of the administration say this is something else that the administration has done, deferring to the UN and some of these bigger issues. So we'll see what actually takes place during the General Assembly. I want to ask you as well about this other big news event, Rick. We have Pope Francis. He's en route to the United States right now. We actually have a live look at Joint Base Andrews. We'll put that up for you in just a moment. That's not it. We will put it up in just a moment, where the Pope will arrive about 2 hours from now. And, the Pope will address the UN General Assembly on Friday morning. The focus is expected to be on the influx of refugees in Europe, but this Pope has talked about a wide range of different, topics, politics, foreign policy. I'm just curious, from someone who's worked with diplomats before, Rick, about what do you think the impact is of the Pope's opinion, of his voice entering into these conversations?
Well, I think it's very impactful because there are a lot of countries that are staunchly Catholic or supportive of the Catholic Church. I'm thinking of countries like the Philippines, where they will listen to what the Pope has to say, and they will use that information to come up with their own individual countries' views. But, you know, I think most countries around the world understand that there is a separation between church and state and mosque and state. Certainly the United States spends a lot of time at the UN especially, trying to separate mosque and state. So we have to be very careful to also, when the Pope visits and the Pope comes to the United States and the Pope comes to the United Nations, we have to understand the Pope's role. It's not to influence, not to demand public policy, but to influence public policy. And I think that's an appropriate role for the Pope to give us his opinion and to challenge us personally, and for our leaders to take that information as one point of information and not just blindly do what a church leader or a mosque leader says.
Well, it'll be interesting to see the influence, perhaps, in a wide variety of topics. As we know, the Pope also addressing a joint session of Congress, so we'll be watching for that. Rick, thank you very much. Always nice to see you.
Good to see you, Jenna.